Alright everyone, we've made it to Tuesday and we're still basking in the glory of Celtic's victory over Rangers at Hampden. Sorry, the other mob, I should say, of course. That's the what we call them nowadays. We've got Scott McDonald back in the channel. John has joined us as well for this. And plenty to chat about. Some very promising Ange comments as well that we can get into. We may even look ahead to St Mirren at the weekend as well. Scott, you tweeted shortly after full time to remind everyone that Ange had got lucky again. Did you enjoy staying up till whatever time it was and watching that?
I got beaten to the punch, didn't I? In terms of, I think Chris might have beat me just by about 5 seconds, Chris Sutton. It was just waiting in the wings, wasn't it? In terms of, obviously, when that result come through. Yeah, I think we got really lucky, didn't we? You know, but the boys played particularly well. I thought they were excellent first half and dominated proceedings and deserved the first goal. And look, in these games, you know, both teams are going to have moments within them, right? You're not going to be fully dominant. It's very, very rare in these games you get a full dominant performance, particularly in a cup final. So they're going to have moments within it. And it looked like Rangers were coming good in that first, you know, in the beginning of the second half. They come out with energy. We knew to expect that because that happened in the game at Ibrox. But caught them on the sucker and 2-0 up. And, you know, for me, it was very comfortable. But all of a sudden, we took the foot off the gas. And then, you know, allowed Rangers to get back in the game itself. But can't fault the performance from there. The defence was excellent, and yeah, some really, really top performances all round. It was a great game to watch. Obviously, being that Celtic won the game, but I think if you were a neutral watching Celtic and Rangers for the first time, I think it was an excellent game as well for the neutral.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I watched the game again on Monday and it was a good game. Maybe the quality at times wasn't there, but in terms of, you know, a kind of end-to-end match, but yeah. But I mean, I felt we controlled the game as well for probably 75% of that. John, you were the voice of reason, I'm going to call you. You kept me calm during the nerves of Sunday with not one but two WhatsApp messages simply saying, we will win. How were you throughout the game though, actually? Be honest.
That was bravado, I would have to say, because during the game it was obviously a nervous wreck, and I don't mind saying that because that is just the stakes of these occasions. And it's interesting, like I thought it was a good game as well, and a really exciting kind of end-to-end game at points, especially in that second half. And I was really surprised to, you know, some of the columnists and some of the sports writers here were kind of talking down the game as a spectacle. And I thought it was a brilliant spectacle. And I you know, if you go into these games realising that it's not going to be always going to be about pretty football. It's about the stakes involved. It's about the history of the occasion. It's about the two sets of supporters, you know, making raucous noise and the players responding to that and kind of showing who comes out on top in a kind of battle of wills almost. And I've always had full trust in this Ange team that they can do that. And I was obviously nervous during the game. There was periods right up to the first Kyogo goal. I was a nervous wreck. And then I was fine for about 5 minutes after the second Kyogo goal. And then after that to the end, you know, I was a nervous wreck throughout. But that's how these games go. And you know, having watched it back, you can see the patterns of playing, both teams going at each other and it all add into that. And during the game, you're just kind of keeping your fingers crossed almost. But I think, as I've said on multiple occasions, I think, you know, this Ange team has earned the trust and kind of earned, you know, the right for fans to have a belief in them and trust that they're going to get the job done, which is why, you know, just before kick-off and at half-time, I messaged you, Hamish, and just said, we will win, because ultimately you've got to have belief that they will in the end.
Yeah, I think the next derby, I'm just going to take a leaf out of your book, John, complete faith, no nerves at all for the next derby, because I think we're at that stage with Ange where we should never doubt anything the guy says for the rest of his life or anything he tries to do, because he always seems to come out on top. So many big performers though, Scott, you know, it's those cup finals, those are the days that you're kind of remembered for at Celtic, and I think every player, certainly every player that started and the majority of the subs offered something really important in that game. I mean, Alistair Johnson, fantastic. He's only been at the club 6 weeks, and I thought that was as good a cup final performance as I've seen in ages. Greg Taylor was good. Carol Starfelt was brilliant. Cameron Carter-Vickers is just always brilliant, immense in that game. You could go through the entire team and just really strong, consistent performances throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the pick of the bunch, I mean, obviously the captain speaks for himself. You know, he's a wonderful performer and an amazing leader I think we talk about it often in terms of the role that he had to take over from Scott, but he's been himself throughout that, and the progression is out of this world in terms of how he's took that on and just been natural, but in his own way. And he was brilliant again within the game, top performance. But for me, he just seems to be getting better and better. It's Rio Hatate. I love watching him play. He was magnificent in that first half, particularly, and just he was everywhere as well, you know. And his energy just caused them so many difficulties. You talk about energy. There's only one guy that outworks him, and that's his counterpart, Maeda. It's just, I mean, you heard the pundits during the game going, I don't know what he eats, but it's phenomenal what he does. And again, you know, his work ethic was wonderful. I was a bit worried when there was 5 minutes on. I shouldn't be worried though when Ange is making changes, because we should all trust what he's doing. And Haksabanovic should score. However, at 2-1, you're thinking, well, why are we taking him off all of a sudden to let Tavernier bomb on when he's done so well against him the whole game? That was the only one thing I was worried about. But all's well that ends well. And to be fair, Haksabanovic should have really put the icing on the cake at the end of the game as well, and had some wonderful moments when he come on with his fresh legs. So, like you said, I think everyone that come on played their roles excellently as well, and did magnificent to get, you know, Celtic the victory as well.
Scott, one thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you caught this after the game, but Ange was kind of speaking about giving players responsibility to make tweaks in the game, you know, and if they have to go a bit more direct when Rangers were pressing more, or perhaps because the pitch was kind of cutting up a bit. Is giving players that kind of responsibility for tactical tweaks normal? Is that what you would expect to happen? Ange was kind of saying that it wasn't really, you know, on his behalf and the coaching staff's behalf, but really giving that trust to the players. Is that normal, or is that something that...
No, it's not, John. And that's what that is experience and maturity from your head coach. That's what that is. That's huge maturity and huge experience. People didn't realise he had that till he got to Celtic. But this guy's been a manager now and a head coach for 30 years. He's seen a lot. He's won a lot. And one thing I think he's probably learnt over the duration is to relax and trust his players and give them that trust and that onus on them, to take the responsibility and accountability to make their choices out there. Give them the sort of the outlay of what the game should be and the output of how we want to play. However, I can't kick every ball for you. And it's something that you're learning. Even I'm very much learning at that learning space where you can't control every movement, every moment of the game for the individual. You've got to do your work on the training ground. You've got to give them the identity. You've got to give them the ideas, and you've got to put them in their head and give them the different options that are there for them. However, you can't play the game for them. And sometimes you have to do things that goes against the grain of how you play, because in big moments you need to make those tough decisions. And I think he did it perfectly. And you know, it's easy for a head coach at that point to get annoyed, antagonised on the touchline. You see the arms go, you see the body language change. You never see that from Ange. And not to say that didn't happen in his. I reckon if you were to go back to video in his first 5 years or whatever he was as a head coach, that would have been a lot different. It just comes with maturity and experience, and you can see that, and that's why he is Celtic, you know, the Celtic manager, because he has that, and he truly has something special as a manager, and he always seems to, like Hamish said, is iconic in terms of when he speaks. Certainly everyone listens now and is waiting for another key message. It always seems like he comes with a key message every time he speaks.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever actually just watched him, you know, at a game on the touchline. He genuinely doesn't move. He stands with his arms kind of folded or by his side for the entirety of a game. None of the coaching staff really talk to him. Maybe in a break of play, John Kennedy will wander over occasionally. But apart from that, you know, Ange isn't in conversation with anyone. He doesn't even chat really to the fourth official. He doesn't get involved in that kind of the politics of that. He just watches the game. And also, I don't know if you saw the video Celtic posted kind of behind the scenes after the game. All of the dressing room stuff, Ange is nowhere to be seen. It's just the players in the dressing room. And you hear of these things, but it's funny actually seeing it. And I guess, Scott, that just gives the players that responsibility. And these Celtic players seem to love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that shows a huge trust from their manager. but the aura that he has when he walks into a room is totally different for that reason, because you don't see a lot of him. So when you see him, you shut up, and then when he speaks, you listen. And he's got great staff around him that he inherited, but understand his ways. He's no nonsense. He's an absolute no nonsense type of guy. You can't. If we think that he's just a nice guy and he takes nothing from the players, I think it's a very strict regime inside there, and they know who's boss and what needs to be done and what they need to do. But you need that at a club like Celtic, because the winning culture is everything. And he's got that culture. And you heard him there after the game saying, yeah, we'll enjoy tonight. And it's all about tonight. But, we know that things move on quickly and we got to win next week. So he'll be thinking about the next one already.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was comments a few weeks ago when he was kind of asked about, whether he ever goes through the players, and he says there has been a few moments, obviously, where he's had to, and I think it's more around the training ground. If he sees something that he doesn't like, or he sees something that is kind of below the standards that he believes in, then that's when he'll go. I would love to see that, of course. Everyone would love to see that. It was interesting. Do you think, I was just interested to get your perspective on this as well, Scott, is like, do you think like the game management side of it and kind of seeing out results is going to be, this will be the next big step for this Celtic team? Obviously, we've seen it in the final, but if we're talking about Europe, and I'm thinking back to the teams that you played in Europe in the Champions League, your team was very adept at seeing out games when you had a lead, or kind of making sure that you got a result by any means necessary. Is that kind of the next step for this team? And it's interesting that everyone always talks about Ange's tactics and tweaks, but it's really going to be down to how this, the team, the collective takes responsibility for that and adapts to that in game situations.
Yeah, of course. Look, I think you can't compare with apples ever. I think the game's evolved, and I think where Brendan Rodgers has tried to take the team, and then obviously Ange thereafter that, it's a different type of philosophy in the way of football, and they want to play. Ange will never sit back and want to not be expansive or try and have a opposition, and that's where you leave yourself open in terms of when you play European football against high caliber level of quality of teams, they're going to catch you out, and a numerical advantage, because they've got quality players to hit you on a counter attack. In the Scottish game, you don't necessarily get that all the time, and that's where it becomes difficult, doesn't it, John? Because you're not playing against that threat every week. You're getting it probably the 4 games you're getting against Rangers, where they're going to have more moments than others. But are you really getting that enough to actually learn from it and want to actually play in a different style, a different way to get the points? It'd be different if you weren't winning every week, wouldn't it? If you were in the Premier League and you had to adapt and get points on the board. But the way Celtic are as a club and the way the fans demand, you need to play, and you need to play with attacking intent, and you need to score goals, and you need to be on the front foot always. And look, it's an interesting question. Whether or not that changes over time, I would probably say no. I don't see that being the case, that there will be pragmatic at times. I think if you're leading a game, it's different, right? And I think then at times, then if he is willing to be like that and allow the players to make those decisions, then that will tell in itself, won't it? But they need to take the lead in the games first.
Yeah, we should say, John, that was kind of the focus, I think, of your kind of post-match Optus Sport article. I will link that in the description for people to have a read. For me, kind of thinking back to the game on Sunday, the overwhelming sense is that, we're 18 months in from Ange's arrival, and to me it still feels like a team very much in its early days. I just think there's so much potential, in virtually every player in that squad. You look back 6 months and you could probably make a case for every player having improved from that point. And even players like on Sunday that came on, like Iwata and Haksabanovic, players we haven't really seen much of over the last few weeks. I felt those 3 all really came on and applied themselves brilliantly. I can't speak highly enough of their performances, and O'Reilly and Abada as well. And it's ominous for the rest of the country when you look at the fact we've won 30 out of 32 domestic matches this season, and yet there's just so much more to come. There's so many players in that squad who we're yet to fully see, or there's so much improvement in Hatate and O'Reilly and Kyogo and Alistair Johnson and Greg Taylor, and Ange is just going to keep like going for this improvement, John, as well. That's the thing, that we're never going to be satisfied.
Yeah, and I actually, just to go back to something Scott said earlier, like I do think Hatate is like the emerging superstar in this team. It feels like that to me watching him, and you can see him get better and better over weeks at a time. And it's really interesting when Ange talks about him in the media, because he talks about how, you know, he's a guy who is constantly every day at the coaches, at the analysts, looking for ways to make his game get better. And it just sounds like he's got a mentality where he just wants to reach the top, and hopefully we get to see a lot of that at Celtic. But yeah, I think Hatate is one of the players who kind of typifies what you're talking about in terms of like constant improvement. Because if you think about this time last year, he arrived with a big burst onto the scene. And he scored great goals against Rangers. He scored a great goal against Hearts, etc. Then he kind of tapered away towards the end of the season. This season, it's just been a constant path of he's just got better and better. I think he really took that World Cup, not getting into the World Cup squad, as a real motivating thing. And I'm just really excited about what we see from him. So, I just wanted to go back to Scott's point on Hatate, because I think all the things you're talking about there, you can see it in his performances week to week.
But he's not, he's not unusual in that, in terms of that he's so driven. I mean, I don't know if you saw the story, guys, of Jota. It was, can't remember the guy's name. It was one of the DJs who had basically been round to Jota's house, and he said there was a huge whiteboard with loads of tactics in Jota's flat. And I know a bit of Matt O'Reilly's family, and they're incredibly driven, and Matt O'Reilly's the same way. And so many players in that team, Scott, that have been signed and brought to the club because they think that way, and it's by design, because that's the way Ange wants the whole kind of environment to be.
You certainly have to be of a certain mentality and have to sort of embody what if you're going to have success, they need to embody what the head coach is and wants, and need to have similar traits and ideas. And certainly all these players get that. If they don't, then they move on. And I think that's, the point you make, Hamish, in terms of this team seems like it's got so much more potential. There's no heartstrings here, because Ange wants to keep getting better. So if you're not performing or you don't fit where they're trying to go, then someone else comes in and takes your place. And it's interesting, and I think it's the way that Ange sets his teams up, and whether that be training or the games, the intensity that they play at, it's not easy to go a full season in consistency for him. And I think that's where the squad has been really, really important, because we've seen Jota have unbelievable couple of months, then go quiet. We've had Abada have burst on the scene, have brilliant months, come off a little bit. O'Reilly, similar again, been brilliant, come off it a bit, come back again. But someone else is always jumping in. Whereas Celtic teams in the past, you would go, right, that's my 1 to 11. Anything out of there is going to make us weaker. And I don't see that in the Celtic team. And that's where it's really exceptional. When you watch this team and this squad, that, it's okay, he's not playing, such and such playing today. We'll be all right. It's not bad replacement, is it? Whereas before you go, why is he not playing him for? We don't have that problem. Don't have that problem in this team, because... if you had went back 3 months ago, everyone would have been like, Riley's not playing. Moy playing, I'm not sure about this. Moy's burst on the scene as well since the World Cup and been unbelievable. I thought he struggled a little bit, in the game in the final. For me, I thought he was the one that sort of struggled a little bit. Lost possession, very much unlike him. Got caught out with a couple of set pieces, and obviously we got done with one of the set pieces. And then he come off the back of that. He was raging, obviously, because that was his final play. I could see it in, and I felt for him at that moment. But he's been brilliant. He's been absolutely brilliant, and he's pushed O'Reilly out of the team, which no one would have seen. No one would have thought O'Reilly would have been out of the team when he burst onto the scene, and how well he's done, and then replaced McGregor in a 6. When McGregor's been missing for those moments. So they've all stepped up at their certain times, and you need that. You need that team to have that difference where everyone brings something different to the team. And I've said it before, where you build a house, you don't just have an electrician. You need a carpenter, you need a bricklayer, you need the architect, you need everything. And they all bring something different to build that house. But one thing that they all bring is hard work. And this whole team has that, that ethic, that ideology, that mentality. And it's great to see and great to watch. And Andrew's doing some brilliant things. And 18 months ago, 2 years ago, I never would have thought this, and that's being realistic. None of us would have, because I just thought, being Europe, big job, being in Japan, not speaking the language helped. How was he going to, I always talked about his man management, but that's been special. It's been truly special since he's come to the club, and they're reaping the rewards of everything that he's doing, and even his identity and whatnot. So it's great to watch.
That house building analogy was special. That's one Ange, I think, would be proud of himself.
I agree that it's the work ethic that's for me, as Scott alludes to there. If you think about a player like Jota, who in another team might be considered, something of just a skill player, or to use a cliched expression, a show pony. When you look at Jota and you see it, not even just in the final, but every week even against teams that were dominating, Jota's work ethic is exceptional. He's always tracking back. He's always getting stuck in on the other side of the ball. So I think Ange obviously wants people who are so committed to the cause that they can get stuck in like that. And if you aren't, then you might be heading off.
Yeah, I want to chat a little bit about the Ange comments that came out last night. I believe they were from Hampden post-match. I think they would have been embargoed until last night. A fair bit of speculation, it's fair to say, about if and when Ange could leave Celtic. It tends to come from non-Celtic fans. It tends to come from down south, and maybe in your homeland, Scott. I hate to blame you guys sometimes, but it seems to often be a topic there, given how much you love Ange and maybe want him to get to the very top level of European football. We've not really heard what Ange has kind of had to say about it until now. I'll just read a little bit about what he had to say. When people say he's going to go down the road or somewhere else with the first offer he gets, it's not how I'm wired, it's not how I think. For me, what it's about is just trying to leave a mark wherever I am. I have done that with every football club I have been at. I want to do that at this football club, and that is all that consumes me. I don't think about the next step, or I need to go out somewhere else, or I need to do this, or I need to consider other things. It is all there. I am hoping that over the course of time, as long as I'm here, and I am still here even though people have been getting me out the door, and I think you'll be surprised how long I am here. All that I do when I am here is just be consumed by what I do and try to make this football club the best it can be and enjoy every minute. There's a few headlines in there, John. For me, it's about leaving a mark at Celtic. I think many Celtic fans, well, all Celtic fans would say he's already done that. But I think from his point of view, I'm almost certain that he sees that mark happening mainly in Europe. And I honestly think he wants to achieve something pretty special with us in Europe. Whether he can or not, we'll wait to see. But I think he thinks it's achievable.
Yeah. Just a few thoughts here on it. And I've read Ange's comments, the full thing, about 5 times, because you don't want to misinterpret it or read too much into what he's saying, or you want to read the right things into what he's saying. I think there's a few things going on here. I think, first of all, I think he's basically, saying he's not going to jump at any job that comes up in England just because it's in England. I don't think he's interested in that. He would only be interested in the right kind of project. And I think that's the frustration for him is whenever a job comes up in England, Ange is inevitably linked with it now, which is whatever. That's just how media works these days. I think the second thing he's saying is that he's going to be here next year. He kind of goes into it a bit beyond that. He kind of says that he's going to be here next year and he's going into his third year, etc. And that kind of shuts down all the recent rumours, which some came from Australia about him maybe leaving at the end of the season. I think the third thing of it is the timing of it. Ange is very good at timing what he says and, when he says it. And I think he knows what comments like this mean to Celtic supporters in the wake of a big cup final like this. And I think it's also maybe in a way a message to the players, because if you're a player and you've just won the Scottish League Cup and you're enjoying your success, you've had the day off yesterday over the last 24 hours, and then you maybe see comments like that and you're coming into training, Ange can say to the players, look, everyone maybe has me out the door, but that League Cup win wasn't a stopping point. We're going to push on from here and we're going to kick on. That cup win is supposed to push us on. It's not supposed to be a moment, a stopping point where we can kind of reflect on our successes. And so I think he uses the timing of all that very well. So there's a few things going on with there, but I think he's essentially saying, I'm here next year. And maybe the big checkpoint for Ange at Celtic is after year 3. And whatever happens beyond that, but then we don't really know either way, because there's so much things that can happen in football.
Yeah.
You know, just ridiculous amount of things could happen over the next 18 months that change the entire scene. So I think the end of year 3 is a big checkpoint for Ange at Celtic. I think there's a possibility he stays beyond that. There's a possibility he doesn't. But I don't think anyone needs to be stressed out about him leaving over the next few months or even in the summer. I think he's here for next season. I think that's what he's saying.
I agree with you, John, 100%. I think Ange is there to build a legacy and make sure he leaves one behind when he does choose that. And we have to be realistic in terms of, as Celtic supporters or of any team for that matter, that there is a time frame for managers now. There really is, in terms of how consistently can you keep going to the well at that football club and keep continuously having that success. The law of averages tell you, particularly if it's anywhere else, down south, that you don't even get a year for a lot of these clubs. However, Ange is not stupid as well. What are you building here, and how special it is, and the connection that he has with his fans, and how much they get him, and vice versa, and what he's building in terms of his ideology within the football club and on the football field. It's a dream come true for him. Like for any head coach, to be in this position, to get Champions League football, to win trophies, to be able to get a team to play a certain style of football and dominate games, it's brilliant. But there comes a time where you go, right, where's the next challenge? You do, because you're built that way. You're built that way as a player. You've certainly built like that as a coach. If it gets too monotonous for him, all right, and he gets bored, then he might just want to move on. But I don't think it will be anyone that he just moves on to. It has to be bigger, or foreseen as being bigger to Ange, for him to actually take that leap. And you're talking, he is special, so, and there's not many other managers doing what he's doing in UK football and how he's doing it. And I think that's the particular thing that we've got to look at in terms of how he's built his team and how they play, that a top 4 team could come calling, and if it does, can you turn that down? And that's where I see that. I see him moving eventually. I'm calling it now, but the ties with the City Group won't go away for me. That's just where I always scratch my head.
Said the exact same thing in an interview earlier in the week, Scott, that the City Group love him. Yeah,
and when Pep goes, who takes that? And that's just something inside me that just thinks that way. And okay, guys, listening, relax. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next year. So, but yeah, that's just something where I could see that. I really could.
Just got some breaking news through there that Pep Guardiola's announced he's leaving Man City, Scott. That's a joke,
Very
everyone.
good.
That's a joke.
John?
No, I agree with everything Scott says, and really, it's just, I think Ange just wants it all to quieten down a little bit, and because I think when there's so much speculation around his future, I think it can be a distraction. But as I say, he times it really well, because he could have come out and squashed those Leeds United rumours a couple of years ago when they were going around and at their peak. But he's chosen this moment to do this now, and he's done that for a reason. And someone reminded me on Twitter, a friend of the channel, Cleo Kyle, reminded me that in Ange's book he talks about spending his pocket money to when he was a kid to read the back pages and read the sports pages of all the sports teams and all the sports in Australia. Ange is he understands the media so well, and that's one of his strengths. And he's obsessed with football. He's obsessed with football media, I think. And I think he's picking this moment for a reason. And I think it's a reason to say, and I think it's a message to everyone at Celtic, whether you're a supporter, a staff member, a player. It's a message that this is time to kick on now and go on and try and do something even more special than these moments that we're enjoying right now, which is a thumping League Cup win over Rangers.
Does it get better than this? That would be my question. Hopefully, if it does, we're going to be very, very happy people indeed. We face St Mirren on Sunday. That's going to be a tough game. We'll be looking ahead to that one on our next video on Friday. For now, guys, we'll say goodbye. Thanks very much for giving up some of your time to chat about. Well, it's easy at the moment, isn't it, to chat about Celtic, Ange and all the other stuff. Thank you to you for tuning into this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you've just come across us in the last few days, and we'll chat to you on Friday.